Ethan had been walking for hours, his boots sinking into the strange moss-covered ground. The air was thick and heavy, filled with the smell of wet earth and something sweet he could not name. Above him, the trees were so tall, their tops disappeared into the clouds, their leaves glowing faintly in the dim light. His ship had crashed that morning, a fireball tearing through the alien sky before slamming into the forest floor. Now, smoke rose behind him like a warning signal. And every sound in the jungle made his heart beat faster. Somewhere deep in the distance, a low rumble shook the ground. At first, Ethan thought it was thunder, but it came again, slow, heavy, and steady. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of footsteps. Massive footsteps. He froze, his breath caught in his throat. The vibration grew stronger until the moss under his boots trembled. Leaves shivered, and strange bird-like creatures took off in a panic, their wings flashing with colors he had never seen before. Through the mist, a shadow began to form, huge, towering, and moving straight toward him. Ethan's mind raced. In all his years of exploration, he had read reports of dangerous wildlife, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The shadow grew larger, and then he saw her, an alien giantess, at least 4 times taller than a human, her skin pale with a faint silver sheen. Her hair was long, dark, and tangled with vines. Swaying with her every step, her eyes glowed a deep amber, sharp and unblinking. Her mouth was slightly open, revealing long fangs that caught the light. And she was looking straight at him. Ethan took a step back, his hand going to the small laser pistol on his belt. He knew it wouldn't do much against something this size, but instinct made him hold it anyway. The giantess stopped a few paces away, tilting her head as if studying him. Her shadow fell over him completely, swallowing him in darkness. When she spoke, her voice was deep and echoing, carrying both power and something unsettling. "You smell like food," she said. Ethan's stomach dropped. Every survival instinct screamed at him to run. He turned and bolted into the forest, his boots slipping on wet moss and tangled roots. Behind him, the ground thundered with her slow, steady steps. She wasn't running. She didn't need to. Her strides were so long she could keep up without breaking a sweat. Branches whipped against Ethan's face, and his breath came fast and ragged. He could hear her moving through the trees, like a living mountain, each step snapping roots and crushing plants underfoot. The air grew colder, the mist thicker, and the light dimmed until he could barely see a few meters ahead. He spotted a large, fallen tree, its roots twisted upward like giant claws. Without thinking, he dove beneath them, pressing himself against the damp earth, trying to hide. For a moment, there was silence except for his pounding heart. Then, slowly, the shadow returned. Her massive hand reached down, her fingers curling around the roots like they were twigs with one effortless pull. She tore the roots aside, exposing him completely. Ethan scrambled backward, his pistol raised. But instead of grabbing him, she did something unexpected. She dropped something in front of him, a strange glowing fruit. Round and warm to the touch, its skin pulsed faintly, like it had a heartbeat. "Eat," she commanded, her amber eyes watching him with strange intensity. Ethan hesitated. He didn't trust her, but he also knew he was in no position to argue. His hands shook as he picked up the fruit. The surface felt alive, almost breathing. He took a cautious bite, expecting bitterness or poison. Instead, the taste was unlike anything he had known. Sweet, sharp, and electric. Warmth spread through his body instantly, his muscles relaxing and his mind clearing. But there was something else. A strange energy seemed to move through him, filling every nerve. The giantess leaned closer, inhaling deeply as if savoring the air around him. Her pupils widened, and for the first time, she smiled. Not a kind smile, but something hungry. Yes, she said softly. Almost to herself, "You will do." Ethan didn't understand what she meant, but fear kept him silent. Her shadow loomed larger as she straightened up, her gaze never leaving him. Somehow, he knew this wasn't the end of their encounter. No, this was only the beginning. Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears. As the giantess's deep amber eyes locked on him, her earlier words, "You smell like food," echoed in his mind like a death sentence. The fruit's strange warmth still tingled in his veins, but it didn't calm his fear. Without another thought, he turned and sprinted deeper into the alien forest. The ground was soft and spongy under his boots, muffling his footsteps, but the earth still shook with the slow, heavy rhythm of her stride. Boom, boom, boom. It was not the desperate pounding of a predator in full pursuit. No, this was worse. She was walking casually, almost lazily, because she knew she didn't need to hurry. Ethan's breath came fast and uneven as he weaved between colossal tree trunks. Their roots were as high as walls, their bark glistening with alien moss that pulsed faintly. Every few seconds, he risked a glance over his shoulder. Each time, her silver-toned skin and dark tangled hair appeared between the misty gaps in the forest. She was never far behind, her gaze fixed on him like a hunter toying with prey. The forest seemed alive in ways he had never imagined. Thin vines shifted as if watching him. Giant petals opened overhead, releasing glowing dust that drifted down like falling stars. Small creatures darted away at the sight of him, squealing in high-pitched tones. But the biggest danger was the shadow that followed, steady, unshakable, inevitable. He stumbled over a twisted root and barely caught himself before hitting the ground. The brief delay let her close the distance. A sudden whoosh of air told him her hand had passed just above his head. He dove forward, rolling into the shelter of a massive fern. The fronds were taller than him and swayed as though nervous. Ethan pressed himself low, holding his breath, listening. The forest went quiet. Too quiet, even the usual hum of unseen insects stopped. Then, her voice rumbled through the silence. Deep and slow, you run well. For prey, a shiver crawled down Ethan's spine. Before he could move, the fronds of the fern parted as if pushed by an invisible force. The giantess's face appeared between them, close enough for him to see tiny flecks of gold in her amber eyes. Her lips curved in the faintest smile. Then, instead of grabbing him, she reached into the satchel at her side. She pulled out another glowing fruit, larger than the first, and dropped it on the ground before him. Eat, she ordered. Again, Ethan shook his head, his voice trembling. No. I'm not your... Whatever you think I am. The giantess tilted her head, studying him like a puzzle she intended to solve. Then she crouched lower, her massive knees sinking into the moss. Her shadow wrapped around him again. If you do not eat, she said slowly, I will have to take what I need. Another way, her meaning was unclear. But something in her tone made him believe she wasn't bluffing. Against his better judgment, Ethan picked up the fruit. It pulsed faintly in his hands, the warmth stronger than before. One bite, and the strange sweetness surged through him again. His limbs felt lighter, his vision sharper. It was almost intoxicating, and that scared him more than her size. The giantess inhaled deeply, her eyes half closing. She wasn't looking at the fruit, she was looking at him. And Ethan realized the fruit wasn't just feeding him, it was changing something inside him. Something she wanted. He backed away slowly. But she reached out and pressed a single finger to the ground in front of him. The impact shook the moss and sent a tiny puff of glowing spores into the air. Do not run again, she warned. You will not like how I catch you. Ethan swallowed hard. She stood to her full height again, her long hair falling like a curtain of shadow around her shoulders. Follow me, she said simply. turning and walking away as if certain he would obey for a moment. Ethan considered bolting in the opposite direction, but the forest seemed endless. And if she could find him twice already, he doubted he could truly escape. Reluctantly, he followed. Keeping a careful distance, she didn't look back. But he noticed her slowing her steps, just enough for him to keep pace. They moved through terrain stranger than anything he'd seen. Pools of water that reflected not the sky, but alien constellations. Trees that grew sideways before curving upward like massive question marks. Glowing insects that hummed in perfect unison as they passed. All the while, the giantess's massive form stayed ahead of him, silent except for the steady boom of her steps. At one point, she stopped beside a stream so wide Ethan could barely see the other side. Without a word, she knelt, scooped him up with one hand, and placed him on her shoulder. He almost protested, but the height gave him a view of the endless forest stretching in every direction. Somewhere deep down, he realized the truth without her. He would already be dead, but that didn't erase the danger, because even now, he couldn't tell if she was protecting him or keeping him alive just long enough to take whatever she truly hungered for. The forest air felt heavier now, thick with a strange scent Ethan could not place. Perched on the giantess' shoulder, he could feel the slow, steady rise and fall of her breath. Every so often, her head would tilt slightly. And she would inhale. As if smelling him again, it made him uneasy, like he was some rare fruit she was deciding when to pick. They had been traveling for hours, the endless green stretching in every direction. Finally, the giantess stepped into a clearing where the trees grew wider apart. Here, strange stones jutted from the ground like teeth, each one glowing faintly in the mist. She knelt and set Ethan gently on the moss, her massive form looming over him. "My name," she said slowly, as if tasting the words, "is Valora." Her voice was deep, but not unkind, each syllable echoing faintly through the clearing. Ethan hesitated. "I'm." Ethan Valora's lips curved, almost like she was amused. "Ethan," she repeated softly, her amber eyes watching him closely. He wanted answers, and for once, she seemed willing to speak. "You ask why I follow you," she began, her gaze drifting toward the stones. "I have a hunger, one that your kind can satisfy." Ethan felt his stomach twist. "So, you really do eat humans?" Valora's expression hardened. "No," she said firmly, "not flesh." She stepped closer, crouching so that her face was level with his. Her amber eyes seemed to glow brighter, the gold flecks shifting like tiny sparks. "What I need is in your blood," she said. "It is not life, not energy as you know it. It is something rarer." She gestured to the glowing stones once. "The fruit from these groves was plentiful. It awakened the energy in my kind and yours, but the fruit is almost gone, and without it, my body will starve." Ethan took a step back, his voice low. "And the fruit you gave me, it's what starts this energy." Valora nodded slowly. "Yes, your body changes after eating it. The air around you changes too. I can feel it." Her hand rose slightly, and for a moment he thought she might touch him. But she stopped herself, curling her fingers into a fist. "My hunger is not for your flesh, Ethan. But if I am without this energy for too long, I lose control." The way she said those last words made his skin prickle. He glanced toward the trees, thinking of escape, but her voice stopped him. "If you run again, the forest will not protect you, and neither will I." There was no threat in her tone, only certainty. It was clear now that her presence was both danger and protection. They moved again, following a narrow path between the glowing stones. Ethan noticed how Valora's pace slowed each time the wind shifted, carrying his scent to her. It was like she was breathing him in, calming herself. The thought unsettled him. But another part of him began to see the truth. She wasn't hunting him for sport. She was keeping him close because she needed him. Hours passed before they stopped beside a fallen tree as wide as a house. Valora reached into her satchel and pulled out a smaller fruit, its glow faint. "This is all I have left," she said, her voice quieter now. Ethan took it reluctantly, the memory of the first bite still vivid in his mind. When he bit into it, warmth surged through him again. But this time, it was stronger. His vision sharpened, and he could hear the soft hum of the stones around them. Even the faint beat of Valora's massive heart reached his ears. Slow and steady, she knelt beside him, her gaze intense. "Do you feel it?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "It's like my whole body is alive." Valora's pupils widened, and for a brief moment, she looked almost relieved. "This is my hunger," she said softly. "This is what I have been searching for." The firelight from the glowing stones painted her silver skin with warm colors. Ethan found himself staring, caught between fear and curiosity. She must have noticed because her lips curved into a small smile. "You think me a monster," she said. "Perhaps I am. But remember this, I have not harmed you, even when I could have." They camped in the clearing that night. The moss soft beneath them, Valora lay on her side. Her massive form curved protectively around him, like a living wall. Her eyes stayed open, watching the forest. But every now and then, Ethan caught her glancing at him. Not with malice, but with a quiet, restless need she could not hide as he drifted to sleep. The last thing he heard was her voice, low and almost gentle. "Stay close, little human. Tomorrow, the hunger will grow." The morning came with a strange golden light seeping through the mist. Ethan woke to find Valora already standing. Her head tilted toward the forest as if listening to something far away. Her amber eyes were sharper than before, and there was a restlessness in her stance. "The hunger grows," she said quietly, almost to herself. Then she looked at him. "We move." They set off along a narrow trail, the moss soft beneath their feet. From her long strides, Ethan could tell she was traveling faster now. It was not a casual walk like before. This was a hunt for survival. The air felt heavier, charged with unseen energy, and the deeper they went, the more alien the forest became. They crossed a swamp where the water glowed faintly green. Thick vines hung down like ropes, and strange shapes moved just under the surface. At one point, a massive eel-like creature surged upward, its mouth wide and lined with needle teeth. Valora's hand shot out, grabbing it mid-leap before slamming it back into the water with a splash. Ethan had no doubt the thing could have swallowed him whole in seconds. Valora didn't even look at him after. To her, it was nothing more than brushing away a fly. Further ahead, the ground sloped upward into a rocky cliffside. The stones were slick with moss, and Ethan struggled to find his footing. Valora moved with ease, her long fingers gripping the rock as if it were no more than tree bark. When Ethan slipped, she reached down and lifted him onto her shoulder without breaking her climb. From that height, he could see the vast expanse of the forest, stretching endlessly under a pale sky. It was beautiful and terrifying. As they reached the top, Ethan noticed her breathing was heavier. It wasn't from the climb, it was the hunger she had spoken of. Every so often, her gaze would drift toward him, her pupils dilating slightly. It wasn't threatening yet, but there was a tension there, like a storm waiting to break. By midday, they reached a river that cut through a canyon of black stone. Here, Valora stopped and gestured for him to wait. She stepped into the water, the current swirling around her knees. Her eyes scanned the far bank, and then she crouched low, waiting. Moments later, a pack of sleek, scaled beasts emerged from the shadows, their bodies shimmering with rainbow colors. They moved like predators, silent, focused, dangerous. Ethan's hand went to his pistol, but Valora held up a finger without looking at him. Then, in one motion, she lunged forward. smashing one beast aside with her forearm and sending another tumbling into the river. The rest fled instantly, vanishing into the trees. She returned, carrying one of the creatures, now limp, and set it on the bank beside Ethan. "For tonight," she said simply. They camped near the river as the sun dipped into the mist. Valora built a fire large enough to keep away even the boldest predators. She cooked the meat with practiced movements, tearing strips for herself. Ethan noticed she didn't offer him any. Instead, she reached into her satchel and pulled out another small glowing fruit. "This is for you," she said, handing it over. When he hesitated, she leaned closer, her eyes catching the firelight. "You must eat, or my hunger will break me." The fruit's warmth spread through him as he bit into it. This time, the rush of energy was so strong he had to sit down. His vision brightened until the stars above looked sharp enough to touch. He could hear the faint trickle of water 100 meters away, the slow crackle of the fire, even Valora's deep, steady heartbeat. When he looked up, she was staring at him, not with the hunger of a predator, but with something closer to relief. "You keep me alive," she said simply, "and in return, I keep you alive." The night was not quiet. Twice, strange shapes moved at the edge of the firelight. Once, a massive winged shadow passed overhead. Its cry so sharp it made Ethan's ears ache. Each time, Valora stood like a living wall between him and whatever threatened them. He began to realize that her strength was not just for intimidation. It was a shield he could never match on his own. As the fire burned low, Ethan lay on the soft moss, staring at the stars through gaps in the trees. Valora sat nearby, her eyes scanning the darkness. Every so often, her gaze would flick toward him, her breathing slow and measured. It struck him that she was fighting something, not an enemy, but herself. The hunger. She had told him it would grow, and now he believed her. Before he drifted to sleep, he heard her speak again, her voice almost gentle. "Tomorrow, the path will be harder, and I will be hungrier." It wasn't a warning meant to scare him. It was the truth, and he didn't know whether he was ready for it. The morning began with a sharp change in the air. Ethan felt it before he even opened his eyes. The forest was too still, too quiet. Valora was already standing, her head turned slightly as if listening to something only she could hear. Her amber eyes narrowed, and her voice was low when she spoke. "She is here." Ethan sat up, confused. "Who?" Valora's gaze didn't leave the trees. "Rivera," she said, almost like the name itself carried weight. "She is like me, but different. Her hunger is not for the energy in your blood. 'Tis for the flesh itself." Before Ethan could ask more, the air shifted. A deep, rhythmic thudding began in the distance. It was like Valora's footsteps, but heavier, sharper. Branches cracked, and a dark shape emerged through the mist. Another giantess, even taller than Valora, her skin a darker silver, her hair a wild mane streaked with deep crimson. Her eyes were a cold, pale gold, and they fixed immediately on Ethan. Valora stepped forward, her massive frame blocking him from view. "Leave," she called out, her voice deep and commanding. Rivera smiled, but it was not friendly. "You have been keeping a rare treasure to yourself." "Valora," she said, her voice smooth but edged with mockery. "I can smell him from here. So warm, so alive. He would make a fine meal." Ethan's pulse spiked. Valora's tone turned sharp. "You will not touch him." Rivera's smile widened, showing long, gleaming fangs. "Then you will fight me for him." The ground shook as Rivera lunged forward. Valora met her in the center of the clearing with a crash that sent birds exploding from the treetops. The sound of their clash was like boulders slamming together. Ethan stumbled backward, the shock waves from their blows rattling his bones. Valora's hand shot out, gripping Rivera's wrist. But the darker giantess twisted free and slammed a knee into her side. Valora staggered but didn't fall, her roar echoing through the forest. Ethan ducked behind a massive root, peeking out just enough to see the battle. The two giantesses moved with terrifying speed, each strike sending splinters of wood and chunks of earth flying. Rivera fought like a predator, her movements sharp and aggressive. Valora's style was different. She was precise. Each motion meant to protect as much as attack. The fight surged toward the riverbank. Rivera tried to shove Valora into the water, but Valora planted her feet, lifting Rivera and slamming her into the ground. The impact made the earth split. In a jagged line, Ethan realized if either of them turned toward him during this fight, he wouldn't stand a chance. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, Rivera tackled Valora, driving her to her knees. Her pale gold eyes locked on Ethan, and a slow, hungry grin spread across her face. Valora's voice roared, "Run!" Ethan didn't hesitate. He bolted toward the thickest part of the forest, his heart pounding, but before he could get far, the ground shook violently. Valora had broken free, grabbing Rivera by the neck and hurling her into a fallen tree. The trunk shattered under the impact, sending shards of wood flying. Rivera hissed, a deep, guttural sound, then backed away into the mist. "This is not over," she growled, her voice echoing as she vanished into the shadows. Valora stood still for a moment, her breathing heavy. Then she turned toward Ethan, her expression unreadable. She walked over slowly, her steps deliberate. When she stopped before him, he saw something that made his stomach twist. Her pupils were wide, her gaze locked on him with an intensity that felt almost dangerous. She was hurt. A deep gash ran along her side where Rivera's claws had torn through her skin. The wound was bleeding, but more than that, there was a tremor in her hands. "The fight has drained me," she said, her voice rough, "and my hunger is close to breaking." Ethan stepped back, but her gaze followed him. "I need one more fruit." Or, she didn't finish the sentence, but he understood if she didn't get it, she might lose control completely. Her massive hand clenched into a fist, her breathing uneven. "I cannot protect you much longer unless I feed," she admitted, her voice tinged with something almost like shame. Ethan's mind raced. If Rivera was still nearby, it meant time was running out, and both giantesses were dangerous in their own way. Valora's amber eyes locked onto his. "You must help me find the last fruit," she said, her tone leaving no room for refusal. Her hunger was no longer a quiet presence. It was a living, restless thing between them, and Ethan realized the next steps would decide whether he lived or became part of her survival. The forest was darker here. The light above was almost gone, swallowed by thick canopies of twisted branches. Every sound seemed sharper. The crunch of moss under Ethan's boots, the whisper of distant wings, the slow, deep breathing of the giantess behind him. Valora's voice was low and tense. "We are close. But the dead grove is not a place for the weak." Ethan kept glancing at her. She was still bleeding from the fight with Rivera, her silver skin smeared with dark stains. But it wasn't just the wound that worried him. It was the way her eyes followed him more often now, her hunger clear. She was holding herself back, but for how long? The dead grove appeared suddenly, a ring of blackened trees with bark like burned bone. The air here was cold, and the ground pulsed faintly underfoot. In the center stood a single tree, taller than the rest, its branches heavy with faintly glowing fruit. Ethan felt a strange pull toward it, as if something inside the tree recognized him. "That is the last," Valora said, her voice tight. Her gaze never left the fruit, not in greed, but in desperate need. Ethan stepped forward, but Valera's massive hand came down in front of him. "Wait," she warned. from the shadows between the black trees. Movement stirred. The ground shifted and long, segmented limbs unfolded from the soil. A massive insect-like beast emerged, its body armored with plates of chitin, its eyes glowing a cold blue. Ethan's throat tightened. The thing hissed, the sound like metal scraping stone. It moved with sudden speed, rushing toward them on needle-like legs. Valora roared and stepped forward. But the wound in her side slowed her. The creature slammed into her, knocking her back into a tree with a shattering crack. She gritted her teeth but didn't fall, swinging a massive arm to smash the beast aside. It stumbled, screeched, and turned its focus on Ethan. Ethan ran. Darting toward the central tree, the beast skittered after him, its limbs stabbing into the earth like spears. He ducked under one swing, the sharp edge slicing the air just above his head. The tree was only a few meters away now. With a desperate leap, he grabbed one of the glowing fruits. It came free with a strange warmth, pulsing like a heartbeat in his hands. The beast shrieked, closing in, but Valora's shadow fell over him again. She slammed into the creature, forcing it to the ground, her claws tearing at its armored shell. The sound was brutal, chitin cracking, the beast's legs thrashing wildly. Valora's strength was still enough to overpower it. And with one final strike, the creature lay still. Ethan turned toward her. She was on one knee, breathing hard, her wound bleeding freely now, her amber eyes locked onto the fruit in his hands. And for the first time since he met her, she looked almost pleading. "Give it to me," she said, her voice low and strained. He hesitated, his mind torn between fear and trust, but one look at her shaking hands and pale skin made the decision for him. He stepped closer, holding up the fruit, Valeris. Massive fingers curled gently around it, and she lifted it to her lips. In one bite, it was gone, her eyes closed. And a shudder ran through her body. The silver of her skin brightened, her breathing steadied, and the tension in her gaze faded, replaced by something softer. Ethan stepped back, watching as the hunger seemed to drain away from her face. "You saved me," she said quietly. Her voice held no threat now, only a weight of sincerity, I thought. I might break before we found it. They stayed in the dead grove a moment longer. The silence was deep here, almost sacred. Ethan found himself wondering if others of her kind had come here before, searching for the same life-giving fruit. Valora stood slowly, towering above him once more. She looked stronger, but there was no longer a predator's edge in her eyes when she looked at him. When they left the grove, the path back felt less threatening. Still, Ethan could sense something watching from the shadows. Rivera was out there, waiting, but for now, Valera's presence at his side was enough to keep danger away. And for the first time since meeting her, he realized she wasn't just his captor. She was his shield, his guide, and maybe, against all odds, his ally. As the sun dipped low, Valora glanced at him. "We are not finished, Ethan," she said, tone steady but certain. "Rivera will come again. And next time, she will not run." Ethan didn't answer, but he knew she was right. The final hunt might be over, but the final battle was still ahead. The forest air was quiet, but it was not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the heavy, tense silence that comes before a storm. Ethan walked beside Valora now. No longer on her shoulder, she moved slower than usual, her long strides measured, her eyes scanning the mist ahead. "The fruit has given me strength," she said, her voice calm. "But the fight is not over." They were halfway through a narrow pass between two ridges when the sound came. Boom, boom, boom. It was slower than before, but deeper, and Ethan knew without seeing, Rivera was back. Valora stopped, her head turning toward the sound, her jaw tightened, and her amber eyes burned with something cold. "She will not leave without blood this time," she said. From the mist, Rivera emerged. Her pale gold eyes gleamed with cruel delight. "I smell the fruit on you, Velora," she said, her tone mocking. "You're strong again." "Good. I prefer my prey to fight before I tear it apart." Her gaze shifted to Ethan, and a grin spread across her face and the human. "Still alive, still warm. How generous of you to keep him for me." Ethan felt his stomach twist. Velora stepped in front of him, her voice sharp. "You will not touch him." Rivera tilted her head. "You speak as if you own him. But perhaps your hunger is not so different from mine after all." The air between them seemed to vibrate with tension. Then, without warning, Rivera charged. The ground cracked under her steps as she slammed into Velora. The impact shook the pass, sending loose stones tumbling down. Ethan dove to the side, the dust stinging his eyes. The two giantesses clashed like forces of nature, claws, fists, and roars filling the narrow space. Velora fought with precision, blocking and striking with purpose. Rivera's attacks were wild but powerful, aiming to overwhelm at one point. Rivera's claw sliced across Valerora's arm, leaving a deep gash. Velora countered with a brutal knee to Rivera's side, forcing her back a step. Ethan could only watch, feeling small and powerless between these towering beings. Then Rivera feinted toward Velora, but at the last moment, she lunged toward Ethan instead. Her massive hand closed the distance in an instant. Ethan froze, but Velora moved faster. She stepped into Rivera's path, taking the full force of the blow to her side. The sound was sickening, the kind of impact that broke bone. Velora staggered but didn't fall, her roar echoing through the ridges. "You want him?" she growled. "Then you'll have to go through me." Her strength seemed to surge again with a sudden burst of speed. She caught Rivera by the throat and slammed her into the rock wall. The stone cracked, dust and shards raining down. Rivera snarled and tried to break free, but Velora's grip was unyielding. "This human is not prey," Velora said, her voice low but filled with fury. "He is the reason I still live. The reason my people may yet survive." Rivera's eyes narrowed. "So, the hunger is not just for you." Velora's grip tightened. "No. It is for my kin, and he is under my protection." With a final shove, Velora hurled Rivera away. The darker giantess landed hard. Rolling before catching herself, her pale gold eyes burned with hatred. "This isn't over," she spat, her voice echoing as she retreated into the mist. The sound of her footsteps faded, but the tension in the air did not. Velora stood breathing hard, her wound bleeding again. Ethan approached cautiously, his voice uncertain. "You risked yourself for me." She looked down at him, her expression softer now. "You think I hunted you for myself alone?" she said. "But my hunger was never only mine. The energy you carry after the fruit is life for my people." Ethan was silent for a long moment. The truth settled over him like a weight. She hadn't been keeping him alive just because she needed him. She had been keeping him alive because without him, entire families of her kind would die. He swallowed. "And if I'd run?" Her lips curved in a faint smile. "Not unkind, I would have found you. Because I could not let you go." They walked together until the forest began to thin. In the distance, through gaps in the trees, Ethan saw the glint of metal. A rescue ship. His heart leaped, but there was an ache in his chest too. Velora knelt, lowering herself so he could step down from the mossy ridge they stood on. "This is where our path parts," she said quietly. Ethan hesitated. "Will I see you again?" Her amber eyes held his for a long moment. "Yes," she said, "when the hunger calls again. And perhaps when I no longer needed to seek you." As he walked toward the waiting ship, he glanced back. Velora stood tall among the trees, her silver skin catching the fading light. The ground shook once as she turned and disappeared into The Mist and Ethan knew that somewhere in the vastness of the galaxy, her hunger and their strange bond was far from over.